Melia's Trustmaster reward is a simple yet effective materia. It boosts your unit's HP and spirit by 40%, and boosts their lightning and earth resistance by 30%. Her Super Trustmaster reward is a bunch of floating eggs. No, really. Though it's actually a high spirit staff with a passive 15% boost to HP, and further boosts your unit's equipment spirit by 50% so long as they're dual wielding. Onto her active abilities. Ally of the Forest is a magic cover brave ability that can grant your team a 35% magic mitigation buff against attacks from beasts and humans. Wooded Refuge is a cooldown ability that activates an area effect which boosts your team's defense and spirit by 100% and grants a HP regen. Don't you love how succinct and detailed they make the descriptions? Explosive Barrage deals earth magic damage that scales up her spirit stat and Chains of Bolting Strike, while granting your team a 30% general mitigation buff, which only lasts for one turn. Nestled Within the Trees grants Melia Provoke buff, a 75% general mitigation buff, and a HP regen. One with the Forest will boost your team's lightning and earth resistance by 80%, grant them immunity to stop, boost their resistance to defense and spirit breaks, and automatically activate a HP regen to your team on the next turn. Cedar Shield is a cooldown ability that boosts Melia's spirit by 300%, boosts your team's defense and spirit by 250%, and raises your team's lightning and earth resistance by 100%. Spruce Shelter is a brave ability on a cooldown that can grant your team a 75% magic mitigation buff, and give Melia a whopping 90% magic mitigation buff and a HP regen. Pine Purification can be used twice per battle. It removes some status effects from your team, and while it doesn't tell you which ones because the game is so good and helpful, it actually removes any elemental imperils. Then it raises your team's lightning and earth resistance by 100%. Onto her passives. She can dual wield, with an innate 70% boost to passive Provoke. She has a counter ability which can restore your team's HP and boost their limb burst gauge fill rate by 100%. She also has a Guts buff. With her Trustmaster reward or Super Trustmaster reward equipped, she'll gain stats, more stats, and an MP regen. She doesn't have any innate evasion or boost her limit burst gauge fill rate though. She does, however, have a high level of resistance to earth attacks. While we're here, let's look at her limit burst. Excellent Protection can raise your team's elemental resistance by 85% and grants Melia a 50% magic mitigation buff from beasts and human enemies. Time to change forms. That rabbit can float in the air for as long as it likes, though after touching the ground, it won't be able to float again for 2 turns. Active abilities. Explosive Impact deals increased damage to break gauges of a staff. Oak Assault is a physical bolting strike attack that deals magic damage which scales off her spirit. Maple Barrage is the same thing, though it chains a Stardust Ray. These attacks seem incredible, given that they triple the chain, but to compensate, it can't be included in her double cast. Eggshell Guard grants Melia a 75% general mitigation buff. Earthly Pollen is a cooldown ability that imbues Earth onto Melia and another team member, while boosting your team's Earth damage by 20%. Electrifying Pollen is the same thing, but with lightning. Overgrown Flora is another brave ability on a cooldown. It boosts Melia's spirit by 300%, boosts her resistance to spirit breaks, and grants her a Shrunk Beast and Human Killer. Finally, Evergreen Blessing can be used twice per battle. It fills Melia's limit burst gauge by completely overdoing it, grants her a re-raise, and raises the damage modifier of Oak Assault and Maple Barrage for the rest of her life. Onto her passives. She's gained a Beast and Human Killer buff, and while everything else remains practically the same, she's lost the counter ability and her elemental resistance has been altered from 100% Earth to 50% Lightning. Regardless, her limit burst. It grants your team a 55% general mitigation buff, boosts your team's stats by 250%, and boosts the damage modifier of Oak Assault and Maple Barrage. So let's rank brave abilities. I suggest raising all of them, especially if you plan to actively use her. Raising their level will elevate their mitigation in one way or another, and given that they each have different effects, it's best to just enhance all 3. Time to make a damage rotation, though I should note that I completely disagree with prioritizing her damage rather than her role as a tank. Regardless, on turn 1, activate her Brave Shift. Cast Overgrown Flora and Evergreen Blessing. On turn 2, activate her Limit Burst. On turn 3, cast Wooded Refuge and choose one of the elemental imbues. Then, on the 4th turn, pick your Poison and Chain. So how good is Melia? She's a sturdy magic tank, with strong mitigation and defensive buffs to further boost her bulk. Offensively, she's not as prominent as you might hope. Her elemental imbue only affects one other ally, and the turn duration matches that of the ability's cooldown. It's not as major an issue if your team already has access to Earth or Lightning damage though, as the elemental damage buff affects their entire team. As a magic damage dealer, her damage output is fairly low. More often than not, as a magic tank, you want to give some attention to elemental resistance and other defensive options, which limits the amount of offensive equipment you can give her without reducing her overall effectiveness as a tank. The buffs to her damage modifiers are certainly appreciated, but even then the boost to her spirit stat isn't very high, so you want to dedicate some equipment to raising it further. Personally, I also find a bit of issue with her team mitigation buffs. While the ones against beasts and humans are easy access, her magic mitigation buff isn't incredibly reliable, as its turn duration doesn't match the ability cooldown, and she doesn't have another direct source of magic mitigation. You may want to worry about the lack of physical mitigation as well, but as she is designed to be a magic tank, it's not too detrimental toward her capabilities. Her one-turn general mitigation buff can be balanced by her Brave Shift's Limit Burst, with a sturdy 55% general mitigation buff and a 250% all-stat buff, and though it's impressive on a tank, it still somehow feels lackluster. A lot of attention has to be directed toward her elemental utility and the area effect, and while neither is the best in their respective field, together they give Melia a better booster of viability. A vast majority of Melia's kit has a glaring list of shortcomings in some shape or form, though when you combine these effects, they do a decent job at making a serviceable tank with an assorted array of abilities, which might be difficult to remember given that the game tends to neglect these rather important details. Thanks for watching, and if you like this video, leave a like and subscribe. Comment below if you plan to get Melia. Personally, as someone who already has a strong magic tank, I'm not that interested, partly because I'm just looking forward to 4 units that I've been excited for a good while. I realize it's a bit premature, given that all the details still aren't out in the open, but it's not like I played this game for each individual character's elaborate moveset anyways.